Welcome to the Stories That Shape Us, where we have conversations about how discovering your identity, enhancing your relationships, and taking risks lead to a more purposeful life. I'm Tina Morales, and I'm an associate professional counselor and master's level marriage and family therapist. In my counseling practice, I help couples move from conflict to connection so they can start to live out their relationship vision.
I'm Kiera Johnson, and I own ATL Pula Wellness Studio with the vision of giving every family the hope and freedom to live a healthier life. Through our work, we create spaces and provide resources that foster true well-being.
We came together to bring you these stories so you can collect tools and insights from those who have stepped into their power and are making an impact. Join us on the road less traveled. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Stories That Shape Us. My name is Tina.
And I'm Kiera.
And we are your hosts. Today we have the amazing opportunity to speak with and learn from Dr. D. So let me share a little bit about Dr. D with you. Dr. D is a bilingual, multicultural, licensed marriage and family therapist, life coach, and consultant. She serves powerhouses in neutralizing the inner critic and increasing self-awareness, emotional intelligence, assertive communication skills, compassion, and social skill development, allowing them to live aligned, empowered, and elevated by their legacies. She began her journey in the mental health field and coaching field 15 years ago. The rise of online services has allowed Dr. D to serve busy entrepreneurs, public figures, and professionals at their convenience. So we are excited to have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. D.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. So we want to dive in. We want to know a little bit more about what you do, but we really also want to know was there like a personal story or personal experience that led you to do this work specifically around the inner critic and self-compassion?
Yes. Okay. So I'll begin by sharing. My full name is Maria Mercedes Dominguez, and professionally, I go by Dr. D. I began the inner critic part of my work after I had already had my toes wet in the field a little bit. So I started I have my bachelor's in psychology. I didn't even know what marriage and family therapy was until after I graduated with my bachelor's. And actually, my first research job, my employer was a marriage and family therapist. So she was telling me more about the program and what that was all about. So that's actually how I learned about it. I ended up applying and I got in. So I was working, I'm a military spouse. When I started the clinical side of marriage and family therapy, I was focusing a lot on military families, on how they deal with like that transition from deployment and just having those gaps of period where the family is divided because of, because of the missions and the trainings and all of those things. And so in my conversation with a lot of people and just me going through these different developmental stages myself, like going from a single woman working on her bachelor's to a young married woman applying for her master's. In all of those stages, I noticed that there was like this consistent voice that was instilling doubt. Like, you sure you could do that? Who do you think you are? Where you come from? People don't get to be in these spaces. They don't get to talk to these people. And in a lot of the professional spaces I was in, I was often the only one in many ways. I was the only one because of my complexion. I was the only one because of my background. I was the only one because of my age. In a lot of military spaces, I was often the only one because of my gender. So there was so many ways where I experienced being the oddball or being the only one, and those served as triggers for that inner critic voice to be like, you sure you belong here? What is this all about? What are you trying to do? So when I noticed that coming up in my life, I because, I love psychology, obviously. I love like learning about how the human mind works. I was like, let me research this thing because this is haunting me. And I don't want to sabotage my own self. Because even in the environments I was in, I was only hearing that in my own mind. The people weren't treating me that way. Luckily, I know there are
Mm,
some situations where, I did experience racism or
yeah.
sexism or things like that. But for the most part, like I was welcomed, I was treated with respect. I was appreciated in the spaces that I was in. So I was like, I need to work through this. So it started as an individual journey. Like, how do I allow myself to feel at home wherever I am? And my
Mm.
military hopping around had a big impact on that because it's like just as soon as I started getting comfortable somewhere, oh, we got orders. It was time to pick up and move somewhere else. And I didn't want to
Mm.
have my sense of groundedness be dependent on my environment. Like I can anchor myself wherever I am. And that's kind of the personal part of where that inner critic work started.
Oh my goodness. That
It was a lot. I know. Sorry. I just dumped
no,
on y'all.
oh my gosh, there's so many gems and so much beauty in what you're talking about. Like how do I anchor myself? How do I feel at home wherever I am? And then recognizing like, hey, maybe what I'm experiencing is not just from the external world, or maybe it is coming, like who knows? But there's also a part of it that's coming from inside of me.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious how, in terms of the relational realm, how did relationships influence the internal world or that external world?
Cool. How didn't it?
Yeah.
Like, relationships are everything.
Mm,
Um, so there were some relationships like I kind of hinted to earlier where I did experience some of that, you're not welcome here. I did experience some microaggressions. I did experience like some sexism, right? And so those relationships, if I over if I focused on them continuously, then my mind could easily generalize them and use them as evidence to say, you don't belong here. What are you doing? And just criticize myself. However, me practicing like awareness of my thoughts and mastery of my thoughts and those things, I was recognizing those circumstances were significantly smaller than the other relationships where like I've walked into rooms that and shaken hands with people I've never imagined I would be able to. And it was because of relationship. It was because of me being able to show up. And they're like, girl, I don't care that you're 20 years younger than us. You know what you're talking about. Please come in here,
yeah.
do this training for us, or we'd love for you to facilitate this. Or I was able to, I remember I was research, I was on the research team on a military installation, and I was able to get significantly more people to sign up for this study that we were doing because of my ability to enter in relationship with people, for people to feel like, okay, this is actually going to help somebody else, and I could trust this person. They're not going to misuse my information. They genuinely want to help and they genuinely care. So it was my ability to understand how relationships work and
Mm,
create relationships that allowed me, one, to be a beast at my job and to do what I was doing well, and two, to recognize that I can lean more into the relationships where I'm valued and let those other relationships kind of starve away and they're kind of more background noise.
oh,
I think it's amazing to be able to sit
ooh,
back when you do face a lot
yes,
of that and be able to have that kind of awareness
yes,
and be like, okay, sometimes it's external, but this might just be my thoughts. Let me sit like that awareness.
right.
A lot of people are just, we're in a cycle. So I think that's amazing in your story that you were able to kind of be like, whoa, no, let me think
Hmm.
about this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's almost too like both can exist. The ones that are welcoming me and the ones that are maybe criticizing me or rejecting me
at the same time.
at the same time. Right. And it's like, which one do I want to feed and which one do I want to continue to grow?
Exactly.
And
Oh,
putting those in
Exactly.
perspective and still saying, hey, those negative ones, those aren't most of my experiences. We were just talking about this, like
mm,
those doubtful or bad experiences sometimes take up more space
mm-hmm.
than the numerous great things. And it's just, yeah, that's powerful that you could, kind of step outside of that. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I would like to know, what's the most fulfilling part of your work and mental health, and also what's the most challenging part of your journey so far?
The most fulfilling part has been recognizing that me just being myself and doing what I love to do, like being in deep conversation with others, has literally helped people change their lives. Like that is the most fulfilling. Like I don't feel like I'm doing anything. It doesn't feel like that to me because it's natural to me. I don't feel
Yeah.
like I'm doing anything groundbreaking or anything like that. However, and that's like one of the strategies I use often. I'm like, okay, let's zoom out and then zoom back in. When I zoom all the way out, I recognize a lot of people don't have these conversations that I'm having with people on a daily basis.
Mm.
Um, they're not, that space isn't created for them to actually think about themselves, think about what they feel, think about what they need. And so, me just being able to be my curious, compassionate self and dive deep into conversations and ask a million questions is exactly what has given people the support they needed to be able to pull themselves out of depression or to be able to move forward and attain that professional accolade that they were like, oh my God, I didn't even think I could do this, but I did it. And I chose courage and I chose to push myself and I chose to focus on my visions, and me just in conversation being able to nurture all of that for my clients and know that that was a piece of the puzzle for them being able to attain their goals. Like that's just what's so fulfilling to me. Like I could be me and that can have a positive ripple effect in this world. And I
Yeah.
enjoy the thought of that.
Can I add a question in there? Because
Yes,
I love what you just named. For me to be my curious, compassionate self and have the courage to do some of these things. I'm curious, is that there goes that curiosity. I'm like, was that something that you had to cultivate or really grow over time?
absolutely. Yes. The way the environment I was raised in, I learned how to be stoic or come across as like hard or whatever, just for safety and survival reasons. And it was in my adulthood that I had to learn like it's actually better for you now in this environment, right? For me to
Mm.
be soft, for me to be compassionate, for me to be caring, for me to allow myself to like smile more and really connect with people and use my vulnerability with intention to build relationships. Like that was something that definitely developed in my early adulthood. My teenage self was not this way, like just with her inner circle, she was, but otherwise, not so
Yeah.
much.
'Cause, I mean, you named it right. Like I think we become who we need to be in the environment that we're raised in, right? So we adapt to survive,
Right.
but to recognize that not all adaptations have to be kept for the rest of our lives. Like we can change.
Exactly. Exactly.
Again, the zoom out ability here is just astonishing. Like, again, to step back and say, hey, I'm in a new place, I can be different. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not surprised you've had such great success. It's just it's amazing that you
Yeah.
can be that aware. I'm really amazed by that.
Thank you. And therapy has helped. Like I also practice what I preach. I allow myself to be supported in that way. So me just being able to have those spaces where I become conscious of what my life is and I attribute intentional meaning to it and all of those things, like that's allowed me to overcome a lot of the things I've had to in a beneficial way.
Yeah.
Wow. And what have been some of those things you've had to overcome, some of those challenges?
Some of the things I mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
getting used to being the only one and then not being rooted in a certain place. So, I was raised in a place where I had many cousins and many uncles and aunts and there was tradition and routine and I knew who to call for everything all the time. Like the root system was intact. And if anything, it just expanded, like as people got married or we made new friends, or like the crew just got bigger. In my adult life, being a military spouse, having to recreate a support system every couple of years, um, network more intentionally every couple of years, um, that was really challenging, especially in the beginning where I was figuring out, like, okay, who am I? What do I want? How am I going to not lose myself in this process of choosing to keep my family unit intact? So that has been one of the biggest struggles, because a lot of the times it could be very isolating. So
Mhm.
figuring, and the internet, like me being a part of this age, is miraculous, because then I'm like, okay, I need to lean online, because no matter where I go, like I can still sustain that audience, that crew, that network, that social support. So that is how I was able to overcome that. But that continues to be like a big part of the challenge, is often moving around, and then me being an introvert, like having to figure out, okay, how do I put myself out there again and
Yes.
meet new people and build connections and network and all of those things, especially in our field where every state you go to, there's different qualifications for licensure. So that actually allowed me, or prompted me, to step outside of LMFT practice. So I've included consulting into my practice. I've included coaching into my practice so that I can adapt to my circumstances.
Oh, that's huge. That's I have a question around. So I know my original question was going to be around like what's a skill or a practical tool for someone who does want to learn how to navigate the inner critic and self compassion. I'm also curious if I can add this in here, and you feel free to just dive in wherever you want to. But what does that look like to anchor yourself when it does feel like the ground is always moving almost?
Hmm. Yeah. I'll start with the inner critic and then I'll go deeper into that one. And I know they're connected somehow, so we'll get there. Um, the inner critic, I've learned in my research, but also in my own personal practice and working with clients, at the core of it, it is trying to help us. It is trying to serve us. The way that it does it is in a very toxic and detrimental and dysfunctional way. However, the purpose of it is, it wants to keep you safe. It wants to support you and push you towards success. The way that it does it, it doesn't do it right, but just recognizing that this is what it's about,
Yeah.
then it allows me to redirect my attention to a more constructive way to do exactly that. So, for example, one common thought for all of us is, who do I think I am? Whenever we try something new, or whenever we're in an environment where we haven't been before, there's the who do you think you are to do this? That's all day inner critic, imposter syndrome type stuff. Um, I recognize that, okay, this is coming up. Why? What's really the underlying need that this distorted message is communicating? So when I go deeper into it, I recognize this is about me growing. Like, I'm in my growth zone. I'm doing something new. Like, this is nerves because of the unknown. And this is a good thing, because I'm choosing to step into a space that I've never been before. Now, what is it that I can do right now to prepare myself? And that preparation, that's a lot of where the anchoring in comes in, because I know I'm a perpetual student. Like, it don't matter how old I am, I know I'm going to be reading, writing, like thinking. I'm an eternal student. So I anchor myself in that, and knowing
Mm,
the process of learning is going into the unknown and processing it, and making sense of it. So this is home to me, and I like anchor myself there. And then it's also anchoring myself in my core values. Like, I know that I know people. I know that I know relationships. I know that no matter who's sitting across from me, there's some way, somehow I can connect to that person. And so I anchor myself in that. And then, um,
that's good.
figure out how to, because there's still parts of it that's like unique, right? So there's someone I could connect to maybe in the therapy room in a certain way, but when I'm doing executive consulting, we're going to be connecting in a different way. It's going to be different language. It's going to be different focuses of attention, right? So I anchor myself in what I know that I know that I know in my core. I could connect to anybody. And then I'm learning more about, maybe the different language that we might use in these different spaces, or the different focuses that I'm going to use my questions to redirect our attention to. So that's kind of where that anchoring comes in. And then how I still embrace the unknown piece of it and look at it as far as like me expanding.
Ooh. I want to pull out some nuggets that you just named. So I think in terms of like a practical skill or tool, I think one of the things that you named was understanding the motive behind the inner critic and why it's there, while also recognizing it that maybe like the method it's using isn't as helpful. Right. So like that's kind of like that zooming out, like
Yeah.
kind of zooming out to be able to do that. And then anchoring more so in, and I love what you just named. So it's almost like a skill to kind of take away from this is like anchor in who you are and what you believe, not necessarily where you are or who you're with.
Exactly.
That's good.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
That's good.
And that makes sense. I guess that's how you connect to anyone. That's how you can move anywhere and still not be shaken internally, even though your circumstances have changed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That helps me because I've always had like almost like a struggle with being away from where I was raised.
Yeah.
It's just like a grounding. It's like a new family. I'm married. I'm with my husband. A whole new life that I didn't imagine, and being able to ground myself, like that touched me. So I hope that helps a lot of people. Yeah.
Yes. So true. If you could give somebody maybe like a first step, like a very first step of like, okay, you know what? Maybe I do recognize that I have this inner critic. And I recognize that, okay, maybe I do need to figure out who I am to be able to anchor myself into that. But all that, like, say there's some resistance. Say there's somebody who's just like, either I don't want to do that, or like, that makes me mad that this inner critic, one, even exists, or two, that now I have all these questions about who I am. What would be like a first step that you would say to that person?
I would encourage them. So again, a theme in our conversation today has been the whole zooming in and zooming out, right? So when we're talking about the inner critic, we're really zooming in on it, right? And recognizing, okay, what is it? What's its function? What's its purpose? What does it tend to say to you? When was the first time you remember having that thought? Like that's zooming in on the inner critic. And for someone who doesn't want to do that, I'll be like, okay, cool. That's okay. I'm not about creating resistance. Let's go with that flow and let's zoom out then. And when we zoom out, we can recognize that's one of many voices. That's one of many parts of yourself. That's one of many influences that comes up in your mind. And you have the power to be able to notice them all and choose which one you want to redirect more of your attention to. So you could choose to just notice it and then be like, okay, I'm zoomed in on that inner critic. Let me zoom out. Let me take a step back and pay attention to the other parts of myself that I want to give more voice to. And then you can just choose to release and redirect. If you do have resistance to like actually focusing on the inner critic and doing deep work with that, that's okay. We can zoom out and what do you want to focus more of your work on? Is it that compassion? Do we want to make that voice within you, that nurturing part of you, do we want to allow that to take up more space? So we could zoom out, find it, and then zoom into the compassion. Or maybe it's you're wanting to create more joy in your life. So then we can choose to zoom in on that and figure out what do we need to do to feed that and make that bigger.
That's good.
I like that first step because it like gives that person power. So, okay, maybe we don't approach it that way, but you still have the power to choose something else instead of what that inner critic is saying.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
That right there was the whole relationship. You just brought in the
Yeah.
self-compassion piece that it's clearly connected with all these other parts too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the so if it's the other side of the same coin, the inner critic, the other side of that coin is compassion.
Mm. Ooh,
I see both. That's awesome.
I know.
There's so much here. I think it's just exciting to just hear your journey, how you've had to adapt, and that's just amazing. If you had to leave 3 lessons to someone who's interested in sort of forging their own way, like you have, like what would you leave them? What would be those 3 lessons?
Mm. Number one is the concept of equifinality really, really helped me. So equifinality is the concept that you could take many different roads and get to the same destination. Um, I was the type of person that liked to have a 5-year plan, and I wanted to know what I was doing and how I was going to get there. My life was like, psych, that's not happening. Like, um, so
Love
the
it.
concept of equifinality really helped me understand it doesn't matter if, I have to take the scenic route, I'm still going to get to where I'm going. So it just allowed me to trust and surrender to that process and understand like I have a vague idea. Well, it's not vague. I know where I want to go. I have
Yeah.
professional aspirations. I have personal aspirations. I have intergenerational ones. Like there are things that I'd like to leave on to my children. There's impacts I'd like to have in people who cross paths with me. I know that exactly how I'm going to make that happen. Um, it
Mm.
it can be a windy road, and some of them could be just like, shortcuts. And so I've opened myself up to the idea of equifinality manifesting itself in my life. Like I could create a plan and I still create plans, and I'm open and okay when those plans are changed because I know it doesn't mean that I'm not going to get to the end goal. I'm still going to get there. It just the path just changed a little bit. So like that's the number one I guess tip or perspective that I'd like to give to other people that was
Love that.
so life changing for me.
Wow.
Yes.
Um another one is this zooming in and zooming out. Like that is a big one. We get lost and we go down spirals because we aren't practicing that psychological flexibility, that ability to see things as they are in the grander scheme of things, and then really be able to see things with detail so we could create some of the changes that we need to create in our life. And then third, self-awareness and having a type of reflective process is everything. So whether that's through journaling, whether that's through, conversation with a therapist, or I know other people take the more spiritual route with it, whatever works for you, but having a practice where there is a space for you to explore your inner world is
Mm,
key.
It's a powerful 3. And I can
I
I heard
know.
evidence of you living that out just in these last 30 minutes. So yeah, that's awesome.
Those three,
Those-
I'm gonna take notes of those three because I think those are really powerful
yeah.
lessons, and I don't want those to get lost.
Mm-hmm. When I
I
think of
love that.
equifinality, even like the last couple of years we've been in, just how crazy it's been
Mm-hmm.
and how many plans I'm sure were altered. It's like, but kind of surrendering to that and grounding yourself
Yes.
in the change and being like, I'm still going to get there. Like, that's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
Keeps bringing me back to the nothing is ever
Nothing's
wasted.
wasted. We say this all the time. Like a couple months ago, we were just
Yes.
talking. I was like, God wastes nothing. Like, nothing's
Yes.
Oh,
wasted.
whew,
Nothing.
yes.
Moment, no
I just
second.
got goosebumps. That
Yeah.
is so true.
Nothing's wasted. And I truly, truly believe that. And that kind of speaks to, yeah, you'll get where you need to go. You'll
Right.
get where you need to go.
It's this idea, trust the process.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Trust it. Oh my
Absolutely.
goodness. Um, I want to ask you 20 more questions.
Me too.
Um, what would you, I have, my last question is going to be, what would you say is something from your personal story that maybe we didn't ask about, but you think is really powerful, or was really powerful for you that you think might relate to someone else's story that's listening?
Mm. Um, we kind of brushed it a little bit, but one big thing was me leaning into my uniqueness. So, earlier on in life, I felt left out. I felt often like I didn't belong. I'm multiracial, so my mother's Puerto Rican, my father's from Turks and Caicos. There are not a lot of people that have that mix, right? So even within my family, I looked very different than the other part of the family, right? So I'll be with my Puerto Rican side, I stand out there. I'll be with my Turks and Caicos Islander side, I'll stand out there. So um earlier on that played a negative role, not just that, but that in addition to also the religious upbringing I had. I dressed very differently from people. I presented myself. I stood out. Your girl stood out. I was really skinny and hairy, and like I physically stood out in groups often. And that was
Yeah.
something that ended up having a negative impact on like my self-esteem and things like that. And that's common for a lot of teenagers to have self-esteem issues, body image issues, things like that.
Yeah.
But it was when I um, stopped trying to be a part of the crowd or
Mm.
stopped trying to belong based on
Ooh.
external things, based on my appearance, and recognizing I belong because of my ability to connect. Like there are deeper things that make me belong to people. It's it's maybe we connect from an emotion, or we connect from living an experience together, or we
Yeah.
connect because we shared an experience together, or whatever the case may be. But I noticed like what makes me belong wherever I am isn't because of these external things. It's because of more core value type things, more things that have more depth. And so when I leaned more into, um, yes, I may physically stand out in a crowd, but like these people get me and I get these people. And yes, I belong in this room. Like you take a picture, it might be like, oh, who that? However, like in conversation with each other, we can all click and we can all understand each other and we can all build, like we can find camaraderie and create camaraderie. So that was
Mhm.
just like me choosing to release, trying to find my tribe in that way, and just lean more into I I when you understand relationships and connection, like I'm like I can make a tribe wherever I am. And it's more when you look into the depths of people, like that's where I choose to like connect with others, and I lean more into my differences. I don't try not to stand out anymore. Like I let that be. Um and often that creates more opportunity for me to connect more deeply with people anyways, because they're curious.
Oh my goodness.
I love that.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you for that last piece. Oh my God. There's,
Just hearing you are enough. Like you hit it at the beginning.
oh,
Like you said, you're curious, unique, self, like multiracial.
right.
Like you are enough. Like I think a lot of people. I'm glad you shared that, and I appreciate it. I feel like
Right.
so many people, me, need to hear that.
Right. Your
Yeah.
uniqueness is what actually connects you,
Yes.
not how you're the same
Yes.
as
Right.
someone.
Don't dim your light.
Yeah, that's kind of the paradoxical part of it, because me leaning into my uniqueness is what allows me to connect more with other people to begin with. So it's like we find our togetherness in those like weird, quirky parts of our stories. So
Oh,
leaning into that is actually what's allowed me to build more relationships than ever.
Yes. I love that. I mean, a big part of my story too is that I always felt like I was different from everyone else and that I wasn't enough. Put me in comparison to whatever room I was in. I'm not enough in some form or fashion. I'm not enough here. I'm not enough there. And I'm always so different, as if that was a bad thing. Like that was a negative narrative in my mind. And to learn the difference, to learn that no, this is actually such a powerful narrative, and one that if I lean into it, it gives me more power. It gives me
Yeah,
more opportunities for connection. I love the way that you
yeah.
put that. That's so good.
yeah.
Ooh,
I could dwell on that one for
I
the rest of the
know.
day. That's amazing.
Maybe we can just have another conversation about
Part
that.
two.
That alone.
Okay. I'm open to that.
Yes.
Oh, listen, I just love you even more.
Aw,
Thank
I
you
love
for
y'all too.
thank you for sharing. Even just like a little peek into your story and who you are and how you've kind of come into just the amazing gifts that you give people through your social media, through all the work that you do. And so, if people want to find out more about you, if people want to stay connected with you, how can they do that?
I'm most active on Instagram. So my handle on Instagram is at dr.d the MFT. That's at Dr. D the MFT. That same handle, you can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. So social media, I'm in most of the big places. So you could find me using that handle there.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to like put all your information so that people can find you and stay connected with you. Thank you again for sharing your light with us. You're amazing. I appreciate
Thank
hearing
you.
your story.
I'm so glad to
Thank
meet you.
you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Happy to meet you too. Thank you so much. This was amazing.